for business. But first, here's a reminder of what's at stake. The credit crunch made clear how Britain's prosperity had become reliant on a booming financial sector. It was the bedrock of Britain's boom years of the last decade, responsible for an ever greater proportion of the country's output. And it was hit hard, changing the economy for good. So the challenge for whoever wins the election will be, how do you build a new, more balanced economy that supports other sectors such as manufacturing and the creative industries while not doing down business? And how much should the government intervene to make this new economy a reality? Do they need to look at who owns our companies? Is it right, for instance, that anyone from any country can buy a British company? Should government step in to limit excessively high salaries and bonuses? And how much damage is done to social cohesion if they don't? The banks have received capital injections and guarantees to the tune of £850 billion. The next government must decide what more can be done to encourage them to lend to business to get money flowing in the economy. In the next 45 minutes, you decide which party has the best business policies. Well, just before we came on air, our politicians drew lots to decide the order in which they would make their pitches to you in 45 seconds. Peter Mandelson came first. Peter Mandelson, please take your position.
Britain's economy faces a heck of a challenge in the coming years as the world changes around us. We're not just competing with America and Europe, but with China and India and other emerging economies, and it's going to be tough. Banking and financial services will remain a valued part of our economy, but we've got to rebalance the economy more towards industry, advanced manufacturing, biosciences, the creative industries and green technologies. Britain's companies compete on the best skilled workforce, on a first-rate science and research base, on finance delivered to start-up and growing companies. It's government's job to help put those conditions in place to help business succeed. Business wants a growth plan for Britain's future and our economic success, and that's what Labour is offering in this election.
Peter Mandelson, thank you. The CBI, the British Chamber of Commerce, the Federation of Small Businesses, the bosses of some of our biggest companies, they all oppose your national insurance rise. Why is Labour no longer the party of business?
We are the party of business, and what businesses tell me up and down the country is they want a credible plan to reduce the deficit as well as a plan for Britain's future economic growth. We're offering both of those things, but it will involve tough choices on tax and spending, and the national insurance charge increase next year, not this year, next year, is one of those tough choices.
Peter Mandelson, thank you. Let us hear now from the Scottish nationalist, John Swinney.
In Scotland, the government operates without a majority, and that means that, as the Finance Minister, I've got to get a budget through by agreement with other parties. So balanced parliaments can actually work, can deliver results, and they deliver results for business. Because in Scotland, we have measures in place that support the small business community by reducing business rates. We're investing in the growth industries of the future, in renewable energy and in life sciences. And our efforts to ensure that Scotland develops a strong and prosperous economy will be hindered if we go down the route of the swingeing cuts in public expenditure that are proposed in the UK budget in March of this year and which received the enthusiastic support of the other parties in the UK. We need to have a different agenda focused on growth in the Scottish economy.
Thank you, John Swinney. You wanted Scotland to be more like Ireland and Iceland. It's just as well you didn't get your way, because like them, you'd already be facing massive public spending cuts.
You missed out in that explanation, Andrew, Norway. And in Norway, Norway's got a far stronger financial position than the United Kingdom.
Doesn't have a banking industry.
An oil fund that is able to support key banking interests and key elements of the banking sector. And in all the countries that you mentioned, all of those countries, despite their difficulties, are wealthier per head than the United Kingdom. So I think we've got to focus on how we grow the economy, not slash public spending, which is the agenda of the other parties.
John Swinney, thank you. Let's hear now from the Liberal Democrats, John Thurzo.
This election's about jobs, but it's not just about your job tomorrow. It's about lasting and sustainable jobs for your children and your grandchildren. Now, I've spent the most part of my life in business, and I've suffered waking up in the middle of the night in a recession, wondering about the bank or wondering if I can pay the payroll. What we need is a new and straightforward approach. We need an economy that's based on goods and services people actually want. And we need jobs based on great British traditional industries in technology, engineering, innovation. It's not rocket science, it's just doing good business well. And that's what the Liberal Democrat business plan offers. It's about a new economy based on industries that can deliver for us to give a fair and prosperous Britain.
Thank you, John Thurso. Given everything that's happened in recent years, doesn't your party's infatuation with the euro look increasingly ridiculous?
We've made it clear that in the long term the euro is a very valid aspiration, quite right, but in the short and medium term the conditions simply aren't right, and we wouldn't go into it until they were. And furthermore, we would guarantee the British people a referendum if we ever decided that the time was right.
John Thurso, thank you. Let us hear now from the Conservatives, Ken Clarke.
I've always been a one-nation Conservative. I've believed in free market economics combined with a social conscience. All the policies I've ever had the chance of pursuing have been pro-business, particularly aimed at encouraging small and medium-sized businesses who create the jobs and the wealth across Britain that we all require. And right now, what businesses require is debt and deficit to be brought under control by the government. They require business taxes to be kept as low as possible, with the jobs tax cancelled and with the headline corporation tax brought down by simplifying it. They need deregulation so that they're not bothered by bureaucracy, and they need credit from the banks to be made available by a government guarantee scheme. And these are essential if we're to avoid the most difficult problems of curing the deficit. Until we get business to grow again, we will actually not be able to get the growth and the recovery that we want to see restored.
Right. Ken Clarke, stay where you are for just a second. Ken, just come back for a moment. Why have you been talking down the British economy by saying that if there was a hung parliament, we'd have to call in the IMF?
I said if it was a hung parliament and people decided we couldn't handle our debt, then we certainly would be in the hands of the IMF. I stand by that. Indeed, it's a platitude, because once people decide that we might default on our debt, obviously outsiders will come in. And I do think, because this election slightly turning into hand gestures and hairstyles and a celebrity TV contest, people do have to be reminded this is the worst economic crisis since the war. You need a strong government after it with the authority to take difficult decisions. If you miss out on that, then you are going to have another further round serious financial crisis.
All right. Ken Clarke, thank you very much. Well, we are here to talk about policy, so let's get to the biggest one of all and the biggest event that has hit this